And we're going to start off with the U.S. Eastern precipitation map, where we have some mean sea level pressure in the contours. And I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit here and go make sure you guys can see where we're at Saturday. I'm going to move to the game time here. Sunday, so tomorrow, and then this is the category between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. And Sean, tell me what's going on here synoptically.
Yeah, synoptically, we have a mid-latitude cyclone, right? And this one is spinning up over the Midwest. It's going to start to occlude, and its bullseye is kind of right over the Chicago region. So, Mike, I don't know if you want to kind of highlight Chicago. Maybe tough to see with the precip overlay there. But yeah, we're going to be getting some pretty high precipitation rates throughout this game. It looks like this system is going to be pushing through early on during the game and looks to be moving out of the area toward the end of the game. But there's going to be some heavy rain rates and also, as Mike mentioned, some significant wind associated with that game where we're talking about 20 miles an hour sustained, which is fine. But really the big impact here is we could see gusts up to 30 miles an hour associated with this game for basically the entirety of the game. So as Colin mentioned, we saw kind of the effects of something similar to that. We're not expecting what we saw like New England and Buffalo, but still just to show like when these gusts are going at this rate for this period of time, it does impact gameplay. The other couple games that we're kind of monitoring here, the big one is the Chicago game. But because this is a large synoptic feature with this frontal boundary, Cincinnati, we're looking at maybe getting some periods of rain. And then for the Tennessee, the Giants are going to be playing at Tennessee and the Browns are going to be playing at Carolina. We may get some convection there. So this is a little bit tougher to forecast, but there could be isolated thunderstorms with maybe some pockets of heavy rain for at least portions of the game. We're not expecting big impacts for those games, but just to kind of keep in mind that we may see rain during those games as well.
Yeah, and those thunderstorm events are tough because like we saw at Kansas City last year, if you get a nice squall line or a strong storm moving into a football game, if there's lightning, they're going to put the game into a delay. So while our algorithms may kind of flash here for certain events, if there's a lightning delay, then you're probably going to wait until all the impactful weather is gone. So that's something that we always are concerned about when making these calls about some of these games, that there are scattered thunderstorms in the area. If there's storms, it could potentially like delay the game until that weather moves out. But for this Chicago game, we know that there's going to be wind for the duration of the game. So even if there are any isolated cells in Chicago, they may wait for those cells to move out, but the wind is still going to be a factor.
Yeah. And we are getting some questions on Twitch here. Do we want to kind of move into maybe some of those player impacts? Again, our focus here is going to be on the Chicago game, and people are kind of wondering, what do we do with these QBs, wide receivers, and running backs?
I think we should go to the question. Let's just start with Montgomery, since there were some questions on that in Twitch, and then we'll run through the other players.
Yeah. Yeah, so typically during these games, right, when we have high precipitation events, and especially we're talking about two young QBs, as Colin mentioned earlier on, Trey Lance, Justin Fields coming in here. Trey Lance is completely unproven. He's a raw prospect coming in here. He has a lot of potential. So his floor is huge, but his ceiling is huge, but his floor is also pretty low as well. Mike, you drafted Trey Lance in our league. Are you playing him this week?
Yeah, so there was a ton of offseason buzz about Trey Lance, right? They got rid of, or they essentially dethroned Jimmy G, put Trey Lance into the starting role. They have a lot invested in him, right? So we know that essentially the 49ers are backing him to do this. I drafted Trey Lance. I'm big on him this year. But I can tell you this, I don't feel super confident in Lance this week. I have in our home league here in just fantasy football, I actually made a pivot. I'm actually pivoting to Jared Goff. And that's even something that makes me feel sick saying out of my stomach there, just because no one wants to play Jared Goff in week 1. But particularly in this game here, if there is significant wind, I'm a little concerned. Now, I think Lance will have some will have a floor with regards to rushing. I think he's going to be a mobile quarterback, and that he could potentially make up for any big plays, throughout the air that maybe, you don't see it in this game just because of that wind. But I'm looking for more of a stable option this week in my league, and also in my DFS lineups. I'm not targeting Lance this week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. With Lance, if you want to take that dart throw and go with him, go for it. Just know that floor could be low.
Risky.
Right now, he's projecting. What's that?
I was saying it's risky. Yeah.
Yeah, he is risky, right? He is. I mean, right now he's projected to get 207 passing yards and 42 rushing yards. I don't know if I want to hang my hat on that this week. I mean, Justin Fields, same thing. He's projected at around 199 yards and 39 rushing yards. So really low totals here for both of these QBs. Now, does that mean that they're going to rely more on their rushing game? You have David Montgomery, who's been an established back in this league for several years now, and you have Elijah Mitchell coming in, who kind of took that position from some of the other RBs that we saw from last season, and he's projected here to get quite a few carries as well. Mike, do you have like a preference over Montgomery or Elijah Mitchell, or are you excited about playing either of these options?
Yeah, so we know during weather events when there's wind and rain involved, usually the coaches, when they start to see the quarterback struggle, will start to shift the game plan a little bit, right? You start to see more shorter passes, and you start to see more of the running backs getting involved. If you're playing a PPR, you could get away with David Montgomery. I think he's going to be involved with the passing game, but you have to keep in mind that the 49ers defense was really good against the run last year. So just on that alone with the defense, it does scare me a little bit, and I'm starting to shy away from Montgomery. These are some of the options that I've been kind of considering when playing over Montgomery. A.J. Dillon, I know he's the second running back in Green Bay, but he's going against Minnesota. People are probably wanting to start Montgomery over him, but I think Dillon's probably a safer start, and that's one of the moves I actually did in my league. To answer your question, Sean, I'm actually feel better about Elijah Mitchell over David Montgomery.
Yeah, and I think statistically speaking, right, when we have these rainy games, especially with these two, young UBs, they may be dumping those passes off. So we may see an increased workload in the passing game. So a little bit more of a PPR floor for Montgomery and Elijah Mitchell coming in to this game. I don't expect breakout games for either of these guys. I think this is going to be a slow-paced game. A lot of rushing, a lot of short passes, increased time of possession. Right now, the over-under on this game is 40 points. It actually dropped from 40.5. So they're not projecting a lot of points to be scored here, a slow-moving game, and just not a lot of offensive production overall.
Yeah.